What's going on, college football fans? Welcome back to the First and Long College Football Show. I'm your co-host Marcus, joined by my co-host, as always, Mason. Welcome in. We have got some awesome matchups to talk about here in Week 13. How could it be we're already in Week 13 of the college football season? Doesn't make any sense in my mind, but we have seen a lot of football, I guess, and we've seen some entertaining football. We are right here coming to you right after the college football playoff rankings have been released for week 13, headed into week 13, however you want to look at that. Got some surprises on there. We kind of talked about that before the show started. Decided here at the last second we'll put that up on the screen and we can talk about it here at the top of the show. And then we're going to go over Army at Notre Dame. We're going to go over Colorado at Kansas, BYU at Arizona State, and of course the Big Ten gem of the week. We've got Indiana at Ohio State. How you doing, Mason?
Doing good. Ready to talk about this Big Ten matchup that everybody is going to be tuning into. Wondering if the Hoosiers are going to be able to get this one done, going up against sort of Goliath here in a sense.
Yeah.
Interested to talk to you about that. We've got some things mixing up in the Big 12. All of a sudden, BYU, who was undefeated just before playing their game last week, is now an underdog against Arizona State. Hard to believe how the turns have tabled in that one. But yeah, a few more games that we're going to get into. Excited to break it down with you. Excited to react to the college football playoff rankings here with you as we kind of just looked at it. We've been busy trying to get the show ready here, but we just kind of took a glance at it, and like many of you, we don't agree with it. So ready to talk about it with you, Mark.
We know that none of you agree with it because none of you agree with anything, right? That's all of us. We all have our qualms about the rankings or ratings or college football, their first and long college football rankings. It doesn't matter. Everybody's got their own opinion, and so we do want to talk about that. But talking about the matchups this week, I mean, I think there's going to be some chaos in college football this weekend and the following weekend. I don't see us going the next couple of weekends without having a contender or two go down, maybe more. And they aren't the big premier matchups, some of these, but they're teams that are maybe catching their stride at the right time, or teams that are maybe running, the wind under their wings has kind of ran out, right? And they're kind of, we'll see if they can plane that thing back out, right, towards championship weekend. It'll be fun to talk those over. All right, let's throw the college football playoff rankings on the screen here. Let's see how we want to do this. How about that? We'll just do that right there. All right. So you got obviously Oregon at number 1. I have no qualms with Oregon at number 1. Texas at number 2. Guys, I implore you to go look at Texas's schedule and look at who they played, and you tell me what is Texas's best win this year. I'm just, man, I'm just really don't understand what it seems like the committee this year is looking for, just who has the least amount of losses, and that's it. Not who anybody's lost to or who anybody's beat, or it's really kind of wild to me. And look, I've heard a lot of people talking over the last couple of days about, the college football playoff committee wants to hold up, the SEC or the Big Ten, or they're propping so and so up. I also, to those people, I implore you to go look at the list of the people that are on the college football playoff committee. Little to none of them are SEC coaches or members or anything like that. As you guys know, this isn't the same group of people every year. These are coaches and athletic directors and people associated with the sport from every corner of the country, from every different type of conference you can even think of. So don't tell me those people are trying to prop up the SEC or the Big Ten. That's not what this is about. Now, it doesn't mean that some of what they're doing isn't incorrect, because I don't think Texas deserves to be number 2, Mason. I just really don't. Miami at number 3. Again, this is another team that we can point to, guys, and say, show me a good team that they've beat. I mean, they just lost to Georgia Tech. How Miami moves way up the rankings here. Did Miami even play this past weekend? I don't even think they played this past weekend. I'm pretty sure they were off, were they not? Um, they had lost to Tech, and then I just I don't understand what Miami's done to be at number 3. And look, we've been on Miami all year. I think it's probably the best offense in the country, so I get that part. But beating teams has to matter. Beating good teams has to matter in this sport. And I just, why would anybody schedule anybody then? How about everybody just schedule a bunch of popcorn states? And I mean, I wish we were all as privileged to be able to play an ACC schedule and then just hop and skip to a conference championship game where you're playing SMU and then headed into the playoff. That's unbelievable. Number 4, Boise State. Do they really have Boise State at number 4, Mason?
Well, they have them ahead of BYU, and that's the difference, and that's why they're getting the number 4 slot
bracket. I got you.
So they would be ahead of the Big 12 champion regardless.
So Miami's not number 3.
No.
Well, shit.
But they are. But they are.
Doesn't even matter.
But they are ahead of all the SEC teams outside of I think they have them behind Alabama. So they had Miami at 7. Let me see if I can pull this up and give you guys a visual here. But yeah, go ahead, Mark. Give me a second to pull this
I'm
up.
trying to pull up the college football playoff rankings so I can kind of talk about that. Because, I mean, this is all projection right here. I mean, we don't know who's going to lose over the next couple of weeks.
Well, it's not necessarily projection. This is based off of the rankings today. This is what would happen.
Right. I get that. So here's my thing. So we got Ohio State at number 2 in the college football playoff rankings. We're going to figure out about Ohio State, guys. If they lose to Indiana this weekend, they're out. I think. Do you think? I don't think a 2-loss Ohio State is going to be able to get in there. I mean, not with just the one win at Penn State and no conference championship game. I don't know. That'll be interesting to see how far that they fall out because you just relying on the Penn State win at that point. Texas at number 3. Everything I said about Texas still stands here. I had them. I was saying number 2, but same thing applies at Texas at number 3. I just don't see where the real good win is over Vanderbilt. Yeah, that's a good win. It's okay win. I'm not, but that's not the same as Georgia beating Tennessee and Texas this year. That's not the same as Oregon beating Ohio State this year. That's not, that's not even Notre Dame beating Texas A&M, in my opinion. Penn State at number 4. You guys let me know in the comment section who has Penn State beat that is worth the shit. Illinois. If Illinois is the best thing that you can come up with, then I mean, so be it. But Penn State's not a contender, guys. They're not winning a national championship. It's not happening. Indiana. We'll see about Indiana. I mean, obviously, this is it. This is the big speed bump in the road for Indiana this weekend, and then they can worry about Oregon later on. But I think whether you win or lose to Oregon in the conference championship, if you win this weekend, you're in no matter what. And Indiana may be in either way. What are your thoughts on that, Mason? I mean, what if we get to the end of this weekend and Oregon's got no losses, Ohio State, Penn State, and Indiana got 1 loss? I mean, what are we to do with that? Because here we are, and I talked to you about this before the video got going. Penn State's not playing anybody. So backing Penn State out of the top 4 is going to be really, really hard to do. They're going to have to do it because of the way the bracket's set up. And maybe that's what the College Football Playoff Committee, how they're looking at it. But used to, when we did these college football playoff rankings, you had to be real careful getting a team too far up because it was really, really hard to pull them back out of a top 10 or something like that. And Penn State is kind of in that scenario where they don't play anybody the rest of the season. So they're going to end up with 1 loss. The odds and all the odds makers and everything, I don't know what's going to happen in the Ohio State game this weekend, but all the odds makers and just about everybody I've seen is picking Ohio State in that game. So that's Ohio State with 1 loss with a win over Indiana, Indiana with 1 loss with a win over What's the
Nobody.
best team you beat there? You'd have to fill in the blank for me because again, the Big Ten is Michigan was interwoven into everybody's schedule in the Big Ten, and Michigan has just been completely terrible. And so them being terrible was unpredictable, but it was also kind of the demise of a lot of these big matchups and what a lot of what I thought was going to be trials and tribulations that was going to, compress a diamond in the Big Ten. When in all reality it turned out to just be Oregon playing Ohio State, and that's like the only matchup I can hardly even remember being a big one. And Ohio State, Penn State, I can't even remember another big matchup in the Big Ten this year, Mason. I really can't. And it's no wonder that over like twice the amount of people have watched the SEC rather than have watched the Big Ten this season. If you look at all the ratings and on all that as far as viewership. So I don't know, man. At Georgia at 10, who thinks Georgia is the 10th best team in the country? Y'all let me know in the comment section. I really do want to know. I mean, maybe this is accurate. Maybe Georgia is the 10th best team in the country, but I don't know. I mean, Georgia already beat Texas, so I had several people tell me this week talking about our ranking, Mason, saying, well, so-and-so beat so-and-so. So how are they ranked ahead of them? Well, then explain this to me then. How is Texas ahead of Georgia with no good wins and a loss to Georgia? What are your thoughts on this? I could just keep going on, but the more I do it, the more it just gets me right off.
And this is kind of why I wanted to start the show off with the reaction here, because when we're doing our predictions, which are coming up here in a minute, I don't want to keep getting back to the playoff talk. Let's just let's let it all out. Let's unload the clip here. And then we'll get into the previews, because I think it's really easy when you're doing previews to talk about playoffs and implications, which you probably do need some of that. But yeah, I think this whole thing just needs to get blown up and redone. Our thought process on how to rank teams in college football is completely flawed. When you look at what the Big Ten has put on the field this year, it's terrible. Like you can sit here and tell me that the Big Ten is top heavy, and you'll have a little bit of an argument. However, when you look at the top teams, and let's just look at the 4 out of the top 5 that are on your screen here, how do you know that Indiana is one of the best teams in the Big Ten? Like, because they beat the 6 worst teams in the Big Ten handedly, does that make them one of the best teams in the Big Ten? Maybe so. But even if they are one of the best teams in the Big Ten, does that mean that they are the 5th best team in the country? And I think that's obviously the bigger question here. When you compare the product on the field that the Big Ten has, and I'm using the Big Ten because the committee's telling us that 4 of the teams in the Big Ten are the top 5 teams in the country. But when you compare the schedules that these teams are playing with the ones that the SEC teams are playing, it's night and day difference. Like, you can look at the power index, you can look at records, strength of schedule, strength of record, all of that, and the SEC is above a lot of these teams, or a lot of the top teams in the SEC are above these teams in the Big Ten.
I want to say something while you're on that topic, and maybe give me your best answer, Mason. I'm not necessarily asking you; I'm asking everybody. But why in the hell is Missouri ranked 23rd, Mason?
Right.
Why?
Well, and that's
all those people that get really pissed about the SEC having teams in, and they say there's too many SEC teams, too many Big Ten teams. Missouri gives us a black eye, because Missouri does not deserve to be in the top 25, guys. I'll be the first one to tell you. I mean, I'm not just like put all the SEC and Big Ten teams in there and then, give all the other conferences 2 teams. I'm not about that. I want the best teams in there. I want the top 12 teams in there, the best 12 teams.
Well, and not
deserve to be in this ranking.
Yeah, and to me, it's not the best. It's the most deserving, right? Based on how you played. We can go power index all day long, and South Carolina would probably be in the top 10 if we're just talking about who's the best team right now. that's not what we're doing, right? And I think if that is what you're doing, if you are looking at power index, then yeah, Ohio State has a seat at the table. I think Indiana has a seat at the table. I legitimately think that Indiana is a top 10 team. I'm not. I see your comment, Indy Nation, and I'm not saying that Indiana is not a top 10 team in the country. I'm saying that their schedule is weak as hell, and you give them Georgia's schedule or Ole Miss's schedule or Alabama's schedule, and they're not undefeated. And I think that's where something's got to change here in how we judge these teams. Because right now, if we still had last year's format of the playoffs, you mean to tell me that Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Penn State would be who plays in the playoffs this year? Like, based off of what we've seen on film this year, that those are not the four best teams. Like, it would be a terrible playoff. I don't know, man. This
Indy
whole
Nation, I see what you're saying, Indy Nation, too, and I get it. Look, Indiana, that has been the case with Indiana so far this year, but they're about to have a chance to prove it this weekend.
Yeah.
So I mean,
the Indiana talk is over after this weekend. Like,
absolutely.
Especially, I mean, obviously if they win, my question is, and I like Indiana in this matchup, not necessarily to win, but I don't really know. I haven't decided where I'm going to lean yet on that. We'll get into the preview here in just a minute, but I do think that this will be a competitive game with Ohio State. So my question is, on the flip side, if Ohio State loses, are they out? Because then
should be.
I mean, but so I guess the question is, if Ohio State loses, are they in? And would Indiana have a chance to stay in if they lose? Ohio State has the Penn State win, which if Penn State's the fourth best team in the country, it's a pretty nice win for Ohio State, right? So they probably are still going to be in. Indiana doesn't have that. There's not a win on their schedule that they can point to and say this is why we deserve to be in. You can say the eye test, kind of shows otherwise, and I kind of believe that they are better than some of these teams in the top 12, Miami in particular. I think they're better than Penn State. I wish that they would get a chance to play each other this year. They'd stand a pretty good chance against Notre Dame. There are a lot of teams that Indiana would be better than, but my point still stands. The schedules have to change, and the non-conference schedules have to change for some of these Big Ten teams. They need to be scheduling some tougher opponents year in and year out.
Yeah. Well, my biggest beef here, like I said, why is Penn State ahead of Indiana with a loss? That doesn't make any sense to me, because Penn State and Indiana are in the same situation as far as wins go. They're in the exact same situation. They neither one has beaten a big top 15 team. Indiana's got a chance to do that this weekend, and that's the difference. Indiana still has a chance to do it, and they're undefeated. Penn State already lost. They didn't score an offensive touchdown in their loss. It wasn't a particularly close game, and it was at home. And so it's just, oh my gosh, it's just unbelievable. Yeah. Penn State is the one that's stuck in my craw. Penn State and Texas. You can make an argument for Ohio State. Here's the argument for Ohio State. I get it. Lost to Oregon at the very end of the game. Kind of crazy ending there.
On the road.
On the road. Yeah, I get that. That was a valiant effort. And then you beat Penn State. All Ohio State could do that day to Penn State was beat them. And they didn't even allow them to score a touchdown. So offensively, anyway, they Penn State scored a defensive touchdown. But, Texas and Penn State, man, just stuck in my craw. A couple of teams that skipped around playing tough matchups all year. And I'm not saying they had a choice in the matter. I'm just telling you the facts and what it is. They haven't played nobody, and here they are getting rewarded for not playing anyone. And what message does this send to the rest of the country whenever you are scheduling out-of-conference football games? And who is the net loser on this situation? I'll tell you who's the loser. It's us, the viewer. We're the big loser in all of this. Teams like Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, why in the world would they go schedule big out of conference matchups with a college football playoff committee that isn't rewarding teams for getting good wins, but rather rewarding teams who sit in the corner and hope that nobody looks over their way? That's driving me nuts, man. And
Yeah.
Mason, you talked about it. We'll see how this works out. It's not over and done with. There's still going to be some moving around here, obviously. And the whole seeding aspect of this whole thing changes all of this, because as we just saw, Mason, we had the projections for the seeding and all that, and it kind of changes things up. So what you're looking at right now is going to be different just in the fact of the way things are seeded with conference champions and things. So there's still a lot of moving around to go on. I just I'm interested to see how this goes, just like all of you are. Let us know in the comment section what you think. Indy Nation in the comment section. Problem for IU is that the schedule will set years ahead, and many aren't giving IU respect because they are basing IU off past years. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about that. Look, I mean, I actually heard something the other day. Did you guys know that Indiana? And don't take this the wrong way. Nobody get mad or something. I'm just telling you what I heard. But Indiana is the team with the number one most losses in all of college football. Did you know that, Mason? Everybody talks about the winningest teams in college football, but Indiana actually is the losingest team in college football. And that doesn't have anything to do with this year, but it just goes to kind of point out what Indy Nation is saying. And there is a slanted eye at Indiana, and honestly, the way Indiana's schedule was kind of set up, I don't think it was set up to be as easy as what it is. It just kind of happened that way. And but Indiana's not my beef in this whole thing. I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea. I'm not worried about Indiana here.
There are some people there are some talking heads in the college football spaces that are just like, oh, Indiana will be done this week and we can wash our hands with that. And Indiana's not a good team, and they should be in the top 25, but they're not a top 10 team. We don't think that. We have a lot of respect for Indiana and this program. I think they're really good, actually. I hate actually that we're only comparing Indiana to Ohio State in the Big Ten and not to Penn State. I wish we were getting a game with Penn State, because I think that would be the comparison that I think could really decide who should be in the playoffs, more so than Ohio State or Indiana. I don't feel that Ohio State, I feel like Ohio State and Oregon are more closer from a power rating in index, and Penn State and Indiana are more closer. And I think Penn State would win that by about 10 points.
Wombat Combat, I appreciate your comment and hanging out with us tonight. He says SC going to get left out after refs screwed them in the LSU game. A 2-loss SC team is probably right behind Tennessee. Without that loss, is what he's saying. And look, Wombat, it is a long shot for South Carolina to make the college football playoff at this point. And obviously that loss to LSU was the nail in the coffin, more than likely. But South Carolina is kind of an interesting team in the fact that they're one of the few teams that's ranked in here that's got a chance to they still got a chance to get a big ranked win on the road here. So look, it's going to take a lot of chaos, don't get me wrong, but I'm not ruling out that possibility. I'm still not going to rule out that possibility, because as crazy as all this has been, there are some scenarios in which things can get majorly shaken up this weekend. Alabama losing to Oklahoma would absolutely shake things up like crazy. Ole Miss losing at Florida this weekend. That's two college football playoff contenders that are going on the road, right? And they're going to be playing in some elements. I mean, we watched Tennessee go on the road to Georgia last week, and it was probably the death of that team last week, to be honest with you, Mason. Kirby's been telling us all year, playing on the road in the SEC ain't no joke. And I believe him. And Alabama going to Oklahoma this weekend, they're going to get a greeting out there. And I'm interested to see what that defense for Oklahoma is able to do. And it'll be dependent on the offense. So there's still some things that could shake some stuff up. And, Colorado has got a chance to lose this weekend. I mean, there's a pretty good chance Colorado loses this weekend, to be honest with you. There's other teams involved. Obviously, Army and Notre Dame, only one team can win there. Army's more than likely going to lose that game, y'all. We're going to talk about it here in just a bit. I hate to spoil my pick, but more than likely Army's losing that one. Well, there you go. There's, making some room. But what if they beat Notre Dame? So we still got a lot of football left to play. This thing's going to kind of work itself out. Indy Nation says, look at Nebraska, who Indiana and Ohio State played. Nebraska held Ohio State to 21 points and scored 17 on them. Indiana held Nebraska to 7 points and scored 56 on them. Yeah, I think it's just unfortunate for Indiana that they didn't get a shot at Penn State. I think, Mason, you're absolutely right. If Indiana would have got a shot at Penn State, we would kind of work our way around a lot of this talk. But that's just not how it worked out. And did Penn State play Michigan this year? I can't remember.
No.
So they avoided
no
everyone
Oregon,
except Ohio State.
Indiana, which nobody thought Indiana would have been a big game necessarily, but no Oregon, no Michigan, no Indiana this year for Penn State. It's laughable.
And Penn State almost lost to Southern Cal, who is not very good. It's crazy. Anybody lose now? Let's see. And you're for sure done. Yeah. I feel like we're almost back to BCS days where it was like it matters when you lose now too, right? Back in the BCS days, it was like, well, if you take one loss early, everybody will forget about it by the end of the season, and you'll be right back at the top of the rankings. And now it feels like we're almost getting back to like, all right, who lost most recently? What's fresh on my mind?
But the thing is, the way that these rankings are set up right now, obviously Oregon can afford to lose a game. I don't think anybody questions that. Ohio State at 2 can afford to lose a game and still be in. Texas can afford to lose a game and still be in. Penn State can somehow afford to lose a game and still be in. Like, what are we talking about? They're that highly propped up that they can afford to lose, and because they have a 2 in the loser column, just like Alabama, they should still get in.
Boy, it really seems like this playoff committee has built a house of cards right here, man. Yeah. Like a couple of tumbles and there could just be major changes from week to week here. I mean, the more we talk about it, it's like they have built a glass house here and just one stone thrown, man. Because a lot of these teams are still going to play each other too, so for conference championships and things like that. So, wow.
Yeah, if Indiana loses to Ohio State by 3 points this weekend, why would you move them from 5 at that point? Like, they did better than what Vegas said they would do. They have one loss, so does Notre Dame. Maybe you move Notre Dame ahead of them, right? But then there are a bunch of SEC teams with 2 losses behind them. You can't move them ahead of them. So unless Indiana gets blown out, they should still be at least a top 6 team hosting a playoff game.
Double O'Neill said 2024, the year of the G5. Yeah, who knows, man? I mean, who knows? Double O'Neill's got some scenarios. I was reading it after the show had ended the other day. I went back and because I had missed a few comments, and he was talking about a way. He didn't say he's predicting it or anything like that, so don't get me wrong. But he was saying that there's a way that a couple of G5 teams could get in the playoff, and I mean, it made sense. It was realistic. It just slim chance. But you know what? One of these slim chances is going to hit here. I mean, the odds are one of these somebody's threading the needle and getting in a conference championship game, or that they weren't planning on, or we weren't planning on them getting in. And there's going to be something going on here. This is all this ranking is built on some teams that are not elite. Some of the ones at the very top are not elite, and it'll come to fruition here before the end of the season. I've got faith. I've got faith in college football. It knows what it's doing. It crushes dreams on its own. It don't need no help from anybody. So,
I think all it needs is time. This is the first time we've seen the 12 team I think next year if you took the same schedule and if you took this year and you put the committee for next year on this ranking, I think it looks a lot different because based on what the projection looks like now, the projected bracket, there'd be a lot of SEC teams in the quarterfinals and the semifinals, and I mean, you would have to adjust your power rating. I guess is what I'm getting at. You do that too many times, and you have an all SEC semifinal with 4 teams from the SEC playing in it and all. And it starts to become obvious that the SEC deserves 5 teams in it or whatever. As of right now, I'm using the SEC as an example because I just happen to believe that they're this year at least the best conference in college football. I think that they have more teams that should be in the top 12 from a power rating perspective. But if that were to change, I would obviously change my opinion as well. If it were the Big Ten, which it easily could have been this year if Michigan got their act together. But that's just not the case. And if Penn State could play offense, we're having a different discussion about how competitive the Big Ten and the SEC are. I just don't think that the Big Ten is competitive this year.
Well, we got to jump into some matchups. We could keep going on this. Y'all keep it going in the comment section if you'd like, and we'll get back to you if you're watching this on playback or you're watching it live. Either way, if you are watching this live, hit that thumbs up button, or if you're not, if you are watching this later, hit the like button for us real quick. It is completely free and it helps out a ton. If you hadn't hit the subscribe button, obviously do that as well. But I think most of you have already done that, and I certainly do appreciate it. Let's jump into some matchups here. Let's go with the big dog first, man. I think that's only right that we go talk about the big dog first and foremost here. And the big dog of the week is going to be the Fox noon game of the week. It's big noon Saturday. Indiana Hoosiers are going on the road to face off against the Ohio State Buckeyes. This is going to be an interesting football game, Mason. Obviously, Indiana coming in undefeated has pretty much killed every team that they played other than Michigan, which was back on the 9th of November. Indiana is coming off of a bye week. Ohio State coming off of what I like to call a crock potting. And if you don't know what that means, that's where you throw all the ingredients in the crock pot, right? And you turn it on and you come back 3-4 hours later and it's done. And that's what happened to Ohio State. Slow cooked it at first, and then come back 4 hours later, and the meal was served. And 31-7, Ohio State was able to turn it on really in second, third, and fourth, and get the win there at I believe it was Wrigley Field is where that one was at. Over under for this one set at 52. Ohio State is a 13-point favorite. Last I saw, and I see kind of on the graphic there, it's 13.5 some places. And here's the deal. This is what this game comes down to, Mason. Is this Indiana offense for real? And the reason I ask that is not that I have doubts, but how real are they, man? Because they're about to go against what I think is definitely top 3 defense in the country. This is going to be a tough matchup for any offense in the country. Any. So this isn't an Indiana problem. This is a rest of college football problem. How do you score points against this Ohio State Buckeyes defense? Oregon, I felt like, showed us somewhat of a path to do so. You're going to have playmakers in the wide receiver game, right? And you're going to have to be able to run the ball enough to keep defenses at bay and keep them from dropping everybody back and just, zoning in on zone covers and intercepting passes and things like that. This team is really good. This is one of the most talented defenses we've seen this season. I think it's Ohio State. I think Texas. I think Georgia's got a pretty good defense, but I wouldn't consider Georgia as good as those two. Can Indiana move the football? I think it's simple, Mason. Curtis Rourke has had an amazing season, 21 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, done a great job protecting the football. Whatever Indiana does in this game, they've just got to avoid whatever happened in the second half of that Michigan game, because things came to a screeching halt there. And I'm a little concerned because a lot of it had to do with the run game. And Indiana coming into this game, I'm not feeling as though they're going to be able to run the ball for 150, 200 yards, Mason. I just don't think anybody's doing that against this defense. A lot of Ohio State fans and people who watched the Oregon game kind of complained about Ohio State's what their stance was on playing defense in that game. Didn't bring a whole lot of pressure, kind of just sat back and let Oregon do their thing and kind of tried to react to it. I'm interested to see if that's the position that Ohio State takes in this game, or if they dial up the pressure and come after this Indiana offense. That's going to be super interesting to me. It's an uphill battle for Indiana here. I mean, Ohio State when they step on the field, they're typically the most talented team on that field, 9 times out of 10, and that's obviously going to be the case this weekend. As Ohio State has recruited just as well as anybody in the country, Indiana has not. Now they've gotten a ton of players through the transfer portal, a ton of them from James Madison. Curtis Signetti's done a really good job bringing people over from what was a successful situation at James Madison, and continues to be a successful situation, by the way. Curtis Rourke did not just leave and that program fell apart, and he built a program that is now sustaining and still winning. So really like Kirk Cignetti here. I honestly like I like the coaching matchup of Kurt Cignetti against Ryan Day. I like Cignetti there, but the Jimmies and Joes, man, the Jimmies and Joes, and I'm worried about too many Jimmies and Joes kind of taking over the game, and it won't be as much of an X's and O's type of situation here. What are your thoughts? I'm not telling anybody anything that they didn't already know. Everybody's on Ohio State right now, man. Now, if I'm betting this game, Mason, I'm taking Indiana plus the points all day. You give me Indiana as an underdog this year, I'm going to ride that wave. I'm going to ride that wave. I'm going to be rooting for Indiana the whole game. There's zero doubt about that. I love the story. I want Indiana's story to continue, and I would love to see Indiana be able to knock Ohio State out of the playoffs, just to be honest with you.
Yeah. So remind me, Mark, but a few weeks ago, were you not with me on the idea that Indiana was going to beat Ohio State whenever they played against each other? You were there at some point, right? Okay.
Yes.
I honestly couldn't remember, but I was there too, and I was talking football with a customer of mine recently, and he said, "Yeah, man, I've been telling people that you think that Indiana can do it against Ohio State." And then I kind of realized that I told him that, and I was like, "No, don't tell people that. I don't want to be wrong," And I started kind of backtracking, and it had me thinking for a minute, like, why am I changing my opinion? Is it just because the game's about to be played, and all of a sudden it seems too good to be true that Indiana could win this game? Because nothing on the field should have or has happened that should have swayed me from my opinion. Nothing really, other than a 5-point win against Michigan, right? That game was worse than the score indicated, and Michigan made it a game late. I liked Indiana from the get-go in that game. They came out strong and then kind of slowed down just a little bit, took their foot off the gas a little bit. But my point is, nothing this season since we both kind of agreed that we were on the Indiana side of this has happened to where we should be taking Ohio State. Ohio State hasn't done anything to prove that, I guess, is a better way of wording that. So, to me, I'm trying to find ways that Indiana can win this game. Indiana's coming off of a bye. I think that Cignetti is going to have this team ready to play. They're going to have some schemes set up that Ohio State hasn't seen yet, right? I think that, and you mentioned the coaching battle, I definitely like Cignetti over Ryan Day, but even more so when he's got an extra bye, and Ryan Day doesn't have the bye week to get ready for a big game. So give me Cignetti and his staff with the coaching advantage here. And then, I mean, I like Curtis Rourke over Will Howard. If we're just comparing apples to apples here, Curtis Rourke is the number one quarterback according to Pro Football Focus in college football right now. That doesn't mean nothing. Like I don't put a whole lot of stock and value in Pro Football Focus, but I think that should account for something, and he's been hurt. I know he had the hand injury. He looks fine. I don't think that there's really any reason to believe that he's not at least at 90% in this game, which should be plenty. I really like Surratt. Obviously, the advantage goes to Ohio State when you're comparing the receivers. Ohio State's got the best receivers in the country. They have for a long time. The run game for Ohio State has been surprisingly average, mediocre, considering that they went out and got Judkins and are pairing him with Travion Henderson. Been a little bit better, I think, overall on the ground than Indiana has, but Indiana really hasn't tried to run the football a ton. They execute the passing game so effectively that they don't really have to run the ball very much. But in this game, I think that, to me, I think that the running game has to get involved, and it doesn't matter. I'm not saying any one player has to have at least 100 yards, but I think that they need to cross the 100-yard threshold to be effective, to be more effective in the passing game, and that should, with a balanced approach, should allow for some things to be open in the passing attack there. So those are kind of just comparing some ways that this team can win. I think Indiana's got to stay on schedule. Don't get behind the sticks too much. You're probably going to need you're going to need to be at least +1 in the turnover margin, right, in some capacity. I'm not going to say you need at least 1 turnover, because that doesn't do you any good if you give it up 3 times, right? But you're going to need to be positive in the turnover battle against Ohio State, which I mean, they have a really good defense. That's going to be tough to do. But surprisingly, Indiana, I mean, going up against Ohio State's offense, these two are really comparable. Indiana is the 3rd ranked total yards defense in the country. They're 2nd in yards per play. They're 1st in the country in rushing yards allowed at 72.2. So is that one of those padlock stats where you look at the game and say whoever rushes for more yards wins the football game? I think it could be. And I like Indiana's passing attack more than Ohio State's right now. So I would definitely give Indiana an advantage. I've rambled on long enough, Mark. I still really like Indiana in this matchup. I'm kind of coming back to my senses here. I think that they can win the football game. The only real disadvantage that I see for Indiana is that they're playing in Columbus. That's it. Everything else is pretty even. I mean, Ohio State has the Penn State game on their resume, so you can kind of put a little bit more value, I guess, in their statistics. But statistically, the offenses are about the same, the defenses are about the same. And I like Indiana coming off of a bye week, being able to scheme some things up, understanding that this game is essentially their Super Bowl. Like, you have to win this game to get to the next level. I don't think that Indiana goes into this thinking that whether they win or lose, they're going to make the college football playoff. You're Indiana. Not saying that you won't if you lose this game, but you have to treat it like a playoff game, and I think that they will. I think they're going to come out ready, and I think they're going to shock the world this weekend in Columbus.
I'm here for it, brother. I told you I'm going plus the points. I haven't backed off that much. I think if Ohio State wins this, I don't think it's some kind of blowout or anything like that. I think that this is a business trip for Indiana, and I think they'll be ready to conduct business. 13, I've seen it 13.5. I feel like that's bait. I think they're baiting people into betting on Ohio State, because anything under a couple touchdowns is typically a pretty nice little number, right? 13.5, you like it under that 14. 13, you like it because a push, a touchdown, 2 field goals, difference there. So I feel like this is Vegas trying to bait you into Ohio State, and I think everybody's reaction is obviously going to be, oh, Ohio State versus Indiana, give me Ohio State. We're both going the opposite direction, and I'm ready to ride that train either way. I'm not throwing $1,000 on it, but I am going to put a little something on it, and I'm going to continue to ride the train that's made me money every single week, just about, that is Indiana. They're a complete wagon, rooting for the Hoosiers this weekend. Let us know in the comment section, what do you think's going on in this one? Give us your score prediction for it. Thank you so much for watching First and Long College Football. All right, guys. We can catch up on a couple of.
Dang, Mark, you're not even going to bet a full unit on this game?
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, I'm gonna do a little quarter unit, man. I think, which is actually just a quarter for me. Well, I shouldn't put that on the screen. I'm sorry. I see what you said, Double O'Neill. Okay, that's all right by us. Win or lose, we hit the booze. Oh, okay. I like that. Can I say that here? All right, we'll be right back. Actually, we're going to keep it right here. Stay right there. We need the SEC teams ahead of us to stay ahead of us. No big shakeups, or we may lose that bye. And by we, you mean Boise. Yeah, you're a Boise fan. Are you a fan of another team, Brian, or just Boise? I feel like if you were a Boise State fan, you'd probably have like another team that you maybe root for on the side or something. Boise is fine. If they win out, committee has shown everyone what or who they value. Yeah, I guess they have, Double O'Neill, but I can't quite put my finger on what it is. I don't know what they value. I know they value something. It's very clear they value something. But I continue to not be able to put my finger on what exactly that is. Ohio State loses this game because they're looking ahead. I've thought about this too, Double O'Neill. I've thought about this too, guys. Ohio State's, you know who they got the following week. It's the Michigan game. And if you think that Ohio State ain't looking ahead to Michigan, you're dead wrong. They have a clock on their practice field that counts down the months, weeks, and days and hours until the kickoff of that game. It stays on all year long. So it's a perpetual state of looking ahead to the Michigan game if you're Ohio State. Now, have they looked ahead to it as much this year, considering the fact that Michigan is not very good? Probably not, but I don't know, man. That's certainly something to consider. Not an SEC fan because of the arrogant attitude they have towards anyone outside the SEC. That's not why you don't like the SEC. Come on, man. That's not why. There's tons of nice people in every conference. It ain't anything like that. Now, if you showed up to LSU with the Bama shirt on, I mean, they might not be not that nice to you. They probably would be pretty rude. But I don't think it's an arrogant. I don't think it's an arrogant attitude. I don't. Maybe some. There's bad apples in every bunch.
Well, there are like stupid college football fans, which sometimes we call casuals, right? People who don't understand what they don't understand, if that makes sense. So who think that they have an idea of the sport and then they don't realize how many layers there really are to this. And in that sense, they say, "Oh, well, the SEC is the best." Well, no, they're not always the best. I think they have the best fandoms. Like I think that the SEC kind of rules the ratings perspective of things, but I don't. Obviously, I mean, Michigan just won the college football, national championship last year, so we can't say that the SEC is always the best. But as a conference, here, reasonably, historically, I guess I should say, they have kind of ruled here recently.
Yeah. No, that's the thing. The best conference in college football last year was the Pac-12. I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you that. It was the best conference, I thought, with Oregon and Washington and the battles that we saw there, and there was battles elsewhere. There was other good teams too. It wasn't just the top those two. It was a pretty well-rounded group over there, and I don't really care about what conference wins what. I'm just, I get aggravated with the not paying attention to who's playing who type situation. I can't stand the whole, well, they're undefeated. And it's like, yeah, but what does that matter when they played 12 Helen Keller schools for the blind and deaf. That kind of stuff is what aggravates me. And at least now we do have more teams getting in a playoff where we're going to see. And guys, we're going to see. We'll see how all these conferences do, because we're going to have, used to everybody be like, well, in the bowl games, SEC didn't do good. And then I'm sitting there thinking like, yeah, well, none of them played any of their starters. It's like a spring game for the next season. Everybody sits out, or goes to the NFL, gets ready for the combine. And, we're going to see this year, you're not going to see kids sit out for a playoff game. So that's we're going to get a true measure of what some of the best in the SEC can do against some of the best in all the other conferences, Big 10, Big 12, outside of the Power 4 too. All right. We have struck a chord on this one. Everybody's comment. I can't even read all those. I'll try to read them as we get through this next breakdown, but we got to get going here. Which one do we want to do next, Mason? We did the Big Daddy.
Go Colorado and Kansas.
All right. Let's do it. Colorado and Kansas. Okay, we can start off like this. How about that? And I'll add that in a second. Colorado on the road, headed to Kansas. Kansas coming off of a big win over BYU this past weekend. Kansas is a 2.5-point dog at home. The over-under set at 59.5 for this one, going down at 3:30 Eastern time. So that'll be, I guess, 12:30. Or no, excuse me, it's played in Kansas. So they're just in that central time zone there. So this will be an afternoon game. Kansas is on a little roll, brother. We talked about it last week, but so is Colorado. So something's got to give here in this one. Colorado is right on the precipice of doing something really, really special and working their way into a Big 12 championship game here. Still got a couple more obstacles to get through here in the 2024 regular season before we get to that first weekend of December. But Kansas, we talked about them last week, Mason. Both of us on the show last week, we had Kansas beating BYU, and sure enough, that's what happened. Kansas is on a roll in the fact that the last 4 games that they've played, they've just been super competitive, and they've been against good opponents. It hasn't just happened one time. This is 4 games in a row now that Kansas has played well and played like the team that we thought they would be coming out of the preseason. We had this team in our top 25 coming out of the preseason and looked like complete idiots because they just absolutely crapped down the back of their leg to start the season. And up until a couple of weeks ago, had like 2 or 3 wins for the season. So Devin Neal, Daniels, everything's starting to kind of come together a little bit. Now, last week, it wasn't the offense that played as well, right? We had seen 3 weeks in a row where the offense, the Kansas State game, they scored 27, but the other 2 games that were sandwiched around that, they scored in the 40s. This past week, they only scored 17. Kind of saw some glimpses of what we saw in the beginning of the season where they were turning the ball over a bit. But the defense is what stepped up. I mean, we talked about some of the stats going into last week's game. Now, I haven't updated these stats. I was looking at some of my notes from last week. But going into that game, Kansas had that 81st total defense in the country. And just really, really bad against the pass. Can this defense step up again this week? This is going to be a real test here of this defense. Colorado can straight up throw the ball down the field. And they've just about all but given up on running the football in any kind of traditional sense. This was something we talked about last week. And why I think this offense has gotten a lot better. It's not conventional. This is not your conventional offense. This isn't your grandpa's offensive system here. They're using out wide passes, stretching the field 52 yards wide to be able to throw out to wide receivers and let playmakers make plays rather than trying to turn around and hand it off. The offensive line is a big problem for Colorado, but I don't see where Kansas is going to be a team that's just going to be able to exploit that problem, Mason. Like I said, Colorado's got a scheme in place. Just scheme around that. Roll the quarterback out, right? Move the pocket. And on some of these drops, I mean, Sanders is taking like 7-step drops and, I mean, literally going straight backwards, which actually technically makes it a lot harder on these tackles, but I digress on that. It's working for whatever, the offensive line gives up a lot of sacks, don't get me wrong, but it hasn't affected their productivity in the passing game, really. So obviously the total is really high here, 59.5. That's a lot of points. Um, I'm first of all, my immediate reaction is under. I think the way that Kansas's defense has played, I think that they can, probably hold Colorado around 40 points or in the 30s. But the problem is I don't think Kansas is able to score a ton right here. I don't have a lot of faith in this offense. Um, it wasn't a good week last week. The defensive line for Colorado has played so much better. That's been the difference for Colorado this season, by the way. It's that defensive line. A lot of the team has looked a lot the same. Not the defensive line. They've looked a lot better. They've helped this defense out a ton. I don't see Kansas being able to just run wild here and score 30 points. Maybe I'm wrong. What's your take on this one, Mason?
Yeah, I'm scratching my head on this one. My gut tells me Kansas is going to keep this close or win it. But my head is telling me that Colorado is just playing kind of lights out right now. Like they score a lot of points. When you look at Kansas's offense, it seems like they made a conscious decision at some point this year to not pass the ball as much, and say, hey, look, we've got an NFL running back in Devin Neal. Let's hand the ball off. And now he's going to clear 1,000 yards in this game, assuming he doesn't get hurt, and probably get a couple of touchdowns while he's at it. I think that's the path to victory for Kansas is to slow this game down. You're going to have to get some stops on defense, which stops and turnovers, that is, and I mean we saw the first play of the game last week. Shedeur throws a pick. So, they have been mistake prone, I guess. Colorado has. Can Kansas capitalize on that and then have these long methodical drives on offense to reduce the time? Because I think that the longer this game goes, the more likely Colorado is to win it. You don't want to get into a shootout. I think if the under hits, Kansas has a much better chance to win this football game because of their run game. They're 16th in the country in yards per rush at 5.4 yards per rush. On the flip side, Colorado is 34th in the country, averaging giving up 3.7 yards per rush. I think that, and that's one stat, right? I completely understand that. But if you're looking for a path to victory for Kansas, playing at home obviously helps. But to me, for their offense to have success, you need Devin Neal above 150 yards in this game, or in some capacity. Maybe Jalen Daniels is running for 70 yards in this football game. But I think that they really need to be, as a team, really above like 175, maybe 200 in this football game. Really put some pressure on Colorado, and like I said, shorten this game. That's the path to victory for Kansas's offense to have success. On the flip side, you look at Colorado's offense, and boy, they pass the ball really well. Mm-hmm. Shedeur second in the country, completing 72.2% of his passes. They're averaging 322 yards per game in the air. That's good for seventh in the country. Kansas has been a very balanced defense across the board. They're middle of the pack in the Big 12, but the past few games they've been playing better. And I think that's kind of what worries me about Kansas's defense is the sample size here recently is much smaller in relative to how they're performing, which is much greater than they were initially. Kansas is 25th in the country in interceptions. Can they get one here? Right? Can they get a few here? Can they win the turnover margin? I think that Colorado is a much better team than Kansas right now. I really do. The fact that Vegas has this at what is it, a 2.5 point margin of victory, leaning towards Colorado makes me worry a little bit. I think that they're kind of sniffing an upset out. Which tells me to stay away from this because I'm seeing Colorado as a much better team and that's playing really good football right now. The trend is, but the trend is up for both of these teams. Like both of these teams over the past 4 weeks are playing much better football than they were the previous weeks. So how do you rate that? It's tough, but I like Colorado's offense in this game. I think that they do win. I think that they cover the 3 points, 2.5 points, whatever. But I'm not rushing to bet this because the line is just too tricky for me. I think Vegas knows something. And then with the over under, it's kind of the same thing. I feel my gut tells me it's going to be under 59.5, but the fact that it's so high and Vegas feels confident with that number leads me to believe that this game's going to be at least in the 60s.
Yeah, I can almost guarantee I'm going to go the under on this one. As you can see, we got the college football nerds model prediction up on the screen right now, showing 32.6 to 25.7 Colorado victory there. Yeah, it also kind of shows it shows some advantages for Kansas as well. As poor as Kansas has been, as far as turning the ball over through the passing game, look at passing yards per attempt this year. Kansas is right behind Colorado, like half a yard. So now, with that being said, Colorado has a lot more pass attempts, so that equals out to a lot more yards. But look, I am a football traditionalist, Mason, and we both kind of are. Eventually, if you cannot run the football, eventually it's going to catch up with you. You have to be able to, and you don't have to be the best team in the country at it, but you need to be able to really run the ball for 100 yards a game. That's like the rule of thumb in my book. 100 yards a game has got to be the minimum for a college football team. The minimum goal. Colorado is not good at doing that. Kansas has got an advantage here to keep this thing closer than what people think because they do have a run game. And they do have an NFL running back in Devin Neal. And anytime you're able to run the ball, if this is one of those Saturdays where Kansas is able to run the football effectively, they're going to be able to eat clock, man. And they're going to be able to limit possessions for Colorado. That's why I'm so big on the under on this game, because even if Kansas has mild success running the football, that's going to run clock and it's going to play keep away from that Colorado high-powered offense. And I don't think that Colorado's defense is so good that they're just going to be able to force 3 and outs. I mean, that's not been this defense this year. They've been middle of the pack in just about every category, which is a significant improvement over what we saw last year from Colorado's defense. As I said, the defense has been what's gotten so much better and gotten this team to this next level. There's no doubt in my mind. But with Kansas being on a heater here and having a good bit of momentum and being at home, the last thing that I've got to do is check out the weather, because going to Kansas in November, it can get a little dicey. I'm interested to see what the weather is going to be like this weekend. That's going to be kind of my last box to check off as we get into Thursday, because as we know, out there in the flatlands out there, it gets a little windy, Mason, and it can get a little cold and windy. So who does that affect more? Obviously, Colorado in the passing game. So, with all that being said,
on that real quick, so what I'm seeing is left to right winds around 8 miles per hour. Should be about 50 degrees at game time. This game is being played at Arrowhead Stadium, by the way. For those who have forgotten, Kansas is going through stadium renovations, so they're playing at the Chiefs Stadium.
Interesting. Yeah, that's not terrible conditions or anything. So, Colorado ought to be able to do their thing as far as the weather goes. But just something to keep an eye on. All these games this weekend, guys. The closer we get towards the winter months here, all those games, out west and kind of on the plains out there, you just got to be well aware of what's going on with that weather if you're betting on these things. I like Colorado to cover this spread here. Just my initial reaction. I'm more interested in the under. Y'all come tune in Thursday. We've got a betting show that we do every single Thursday. It's 8 p.m. Eastern time. It's called Between the Lines, and it's Mason and I's best picks against the spread. I am more than 10 games over 500 for the season. So come and join us. I give out these picks for free every week. I make money with them every week. I was barely under 500 for my picks against the spread last week, but hit a money line with Kansas actually last week. So come and join us on that Thursday show. We'd love to have you. And of course, come and hang out on the First and Long College Football Show. Anytime that you're ready to talk some college football, we'd love to have you. What do you guys think in the comment section? Let's see. I'm trying to see if y'all already put it in there. Double O'Neill wrote toss up. Brian Browning, this game, in all honesty, is a tough one to predict. Brian B, I completely agree. Kansas struggles offensively, and Colorado defense is tough as well. Okay. 7 wins was my ceiling for them. Yeah, Colorado's has exceeded my expectations. And while the defense is better, they're ranked mainly in the 40s, 50s, and 60s in most categories, defensively. But that's such a dramatic improvement. You don't go from being in the hundreds to being top 10. That's not how that works. I don't care. Even if you're Ohio State, Georgia, that's not how that works. Even if you got the best players coming in the country every single year, that's not how that works. It's a 2-year proposition typically, to turn around a defense that bad just to build depth and, build talent and things like that. So what Colorado's done has been nothing short of amazing. Are they an elite defense? I don't think that. But I do think that this defensive line has really, really stepped it up, and that's helped out a lot. Still got some questions in the secondary and things like that for sure. He said, Double O'Neill said, if you asked me last week, I would have said Colorado, but after the Kansas BYU game, I'm not so sure about that. Yeah, whatever Kansas has got going on right now, like last week, Kansas actually in that game did everything that me and Mason said that they weren't going to. We picked them to win. We picked Kansas to beat BYU last week. We were very clear about it. The Mormons were in the background. We had 40 Mormons in the background of our video waiting on that prediction last week. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. That they just, as soon as we made the prediction, they just came unglued, all 40 of them. It was really kind of funny. But Kansas in that game did everything that we said they couldn't do and win. They turned the ball over. They didn't really score a whole lot of points. They were just able to somehow hold BYU to 13 points. Well, I say somehow. BYU's been flirting with disaster all year. Low totals, haven't scored a ton of points. They've been one of those football teams. They almost have like the NFL approach of just like, we just have to score one more field goal than you, right? And they've been super clutch at going down the field in the fourth quarter and doing that. Finally bit them in the butt. Weren't able to do it this time.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, Kansas kind of got lucky in that game. It wasn't like some huge blowout win and we nailed it. Like, we need a little bit of luck, But that's how you win bets, right?
Double O'Neill said, you got attacked by a pack of bicycles. The most dangerous biker gang in all the land. The Mormons.
Can we please start the trend of BYU versus Utah as the battle of the bicycle? I just love the name of that football game and that rivalry.
Yeah.
We need like a bicycle trophy, like a bronze bicycle trophy.
John in the comment section. What's up, John? Says, gotta love the Mormons. he said, I mean, who the hell pooch punts it and then it hits the sprinting BYU player right on the helmet? That's kind of insane. BYU was the better team versus Kansas. I appreciate you watching, John. Thanks for coming and hanging out and commenting with us. Yeah, it was wild. That video the other day. Me and Mason, we put in the title. We always put certain games that we're talking about, and we had put BYU in the title. So naturally, the way the algorithm works, it popped up on some BYU fans' page. They clicked on that sucker and they just held in there, man. They were dead silent the whole show.
They're probably watching right now.
They might be. Some of them might be watching right this second.
We got 13 people watching and 4 people commenting. There's probably 9 Mormons in the background somewhere.
There's always a few that don't comment. I'm not Mormons. I'm just saying people in general. But there's always a handful that sit back and comment until I say something outrageous, and then they're like, "Nope, you're wrong." That's the only time we hear from them, which is totally fine. I just appreciate y'all watching. I would appreciate it if y'all did the like button for me real quick so more Mormons can see this. I would like to get as many Mormons on here as possible. That'd be great. I'm kidding. All right, we got a couple more to break down here. Let's get it going. Let me clear my little page up here. I have to clean up my mess as I go on this little piece of crap computer I've got. Um, doing way too much with this thing. You should hear this thing. It's over here grinding away. All right. Let's go. Since we were talking about the Mormons, let's go BYU next.
Naturally.
Only makes sense, right? BYU going on the road to Arizona State to face off with the Sun Devils. It is an unexpected, really, really important Big 12 matchup here, Mason. BYU obviously dropping a game last week. And Arizona State coming off of a big win as well against Kansas State. So, coming off a big win, BYU coming off the loss. So, obviously, momentum is headed in one direction here. BYU got to go on the road to Arizona State, who's been quite a pleasant surprise. I just want to say there was an Arizona State fan that was commenting on something that I said last week, and maybe I misspoke. Maybe the fan misheard me, but I was thinking about it today when we broke this game down. Going into that game last week, Arizona State's strength was running the football and stopping the run. Maybe I misquoted that because somebody had come on and said, are you saying Arizona State can't stop the run? I don't know where that came from. But then I automatically went into defense mode in the comment section. I was like, the stats are what they are, And I didn't even really pay attention to what he said. But 33rd rushing defense in the country, 27th rushing offense in the country. Pretty doggone good. Kenny Dillingham has got a good situation going here at Arizona State. And obviously, I picked against Arizona State last week. I picked Kansas State, and that was obviously in every facet the wrong decision. Arizona State played a really good game and beat a good team. Can they do it again? That's the biggest question here. And don't look now, but Arizona State is right on the front step looking in at the Big 12 championship, Mason. I mean, that's where we're at, right? They are right on the precipice, and they need to win this game. And this game would go a long way in helping them get there. So there is a ton of motivation here, and this is a really, really, really big matchup here. Let's kind of get into it. What are your thoughts? We talked about kind of what the strengths of Arizona State are. BYU has been one of those teams. We kind of were just talking about them before we filmed this segment here. They haven't been particularly great at anything. They've been good at everything. And last week, it kind of just it caught up with BYU, not scoring enough points, relying on fourth quarter points to win the game there at the end, not able to convert. And it kind of finally bit BYU in the butt. And Kansas was able to get away with that win while only scoring 17 points. That was unreal. Obviously, BYU going to have to be able to score some more points here. Just ask Kansas State. That's a little easier said than done against this Arizona State defense. And here we are again, Mason, and I think I like Arizona State here. What are your thoughts?
I completely agree. My question is Cam Scatterbo. I mean, he comes back for the Kansas State game. Looked okay, but you could tell he wasn't 100%. He wasn't in there. He wasn't the bell cow running back that we've seen him be for the Sun Devils all season long. Looking at this Arizona State team, and I don't know. This might be the first breakdown we've done of Arizona State. Maybe we did Kansas or Utah. I'm not sure, but nonetheless, looking at their schedule, I mean, you kind of scratch your head at the Cincinnati loss. Texas Tech, I get a little bit that they have an offense at times. That game was early in the season, but outside of that, I mean, they have been playing really good football. And here recently, they put up 42 on Oklahoma State, 35 against UCF, 24 against Kansas State, which is probably like 35 against most other teams in the Big 12. That's a really good defense to outscore or to score 24 points on. And then your defense actually showed up and played pretty good, holding them to 14. So, but I say all that to say Even without Cam Scatterbo, they were still putting up points, right? As good as he is as a running back, it seems like this Arizona State offense is able to run without him. So even though he may be limited in this football game, I still like Arizona's ability to run the football, or Arizona State's ability to run the football in this one, and and really, I think they're probably going to end up winning this football game. If I'm honest, I'm kind of leaning with you, Mark. When I look at BYU, and I feel like I'm not talking about them enough in this preview, but that's because we've talked about them for the past few weeks now. I think this is our third week in a row of doing a BYU breakdown. What I see from this team is really good, really gritty performance from the quarterback week in and week out. This guy's a winner. Got a lot of grit, a lot of heart. Not super athletic. He can get out and scramble and run the football pretty effectively. He's not going to wow you with his NFL caliber arm or anything like that, but a good, solid college football quarterback. And then you can say the same thing about just about every other position on the field. I mean, I like Chase Roberts. I think he is a guy who might play in the NFL. He's been good for several years now. But I mean, outside of that, there's not really a bona fide stud on either side of the football for BYU. They're really well coached, and they play good football from, in all three facets of the game. However, BYU has been very reliant as a program on turnovers and on the other quarterback playing poorly. That was true in almost every win that they had this season. If Arizona State and is it Leavitt? I think I'm pronouncing that right. Leavitt. Is it Leavitt? Okay. If he's able to play like he has been playing as of late and doesn't turn the ball over a ton, you get Scatterbo involved, get him, close to 100 yards, something like that. Whatever. I think they get close to 200 yards on the ground in this game. But if you're able to do that and you're not turning the football over, maybe you win the turnover battle even in this football game. I think that the BYU offense can be stopped. If you're holding Kansas State last week to 14 points, I think you can hold BYU to the mid 20s, maybe 24 points. And then I'm relying on this Arizona State offense to control the football and run the football efficiently. I think they can do that. I think they can get it done here at home and effectively take BYU out of the Big 12 Conference Championship game and insert themselves in that football game going up against presumably Colorado. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm going to say as far as the total goes, I'm going to go 30-24. Arizona State wins this one.
30-24. 30-24. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I bet against Arizona State last week. I don't know that I'm rushing to bet on the game. Just pure disclosure there. I don't think that I'm rushing to bet on this one. I think maybe I'll just sit back and enjoy it. But with that being said, I think this is going to be just a really close toss-up game here, and I like Arizona State being at home. Not saying it's a huge home field advantage, but there's not a home field advantage for BYU, and I think that does make a difference. I like Arizona State here. I think it's 2 weeks in a row BYU drops a game. I think it was just coincidence that BYU hadn't dropped a game already, guys. I'm just going to be honest with you. I mean, they've had multiple opportunities to drop games, and the laws of averages work this way. I mean, if you win several games by one score or just by happenstance able to win it at the end, eventually you keep doing that over and over, you're going to lose some of those. And I think this one comes down to one possession at the end of the game. And I think Arizona State's able to come up with it. But as I said, I'm not rushing to go bet this one in a hurry or anything. Over under set at 48.5. I would consider the under in that. But this is going to be a good game, and a lot in the Big 12 is riding on this one for sure. All right, guys. Thank you very much.
You know what's funny? We were talking about BYU, obviously Mormon College and all that. Brooks Austin, which I know you've seen a little bit of, he calls Ken Scatterbo Amish. So you've got an Amish running back. I think it's just his last name. It sounds like an Amish last name, but it just I didn't want to bring that up on the during the
An
preview
Amish,
because
a Mormon, and a Jew walk onto a
yeah,
football field.
exactly. That's what I was thinking. You got BYU playing for a Mormon school, and then an Amish running back on the other side. That's Dwight's cousin actually that plays running back for Arizona State from The Office. Pretty funny there. He's not actually Amish. I fact checked that.
Scatterbo.
Yeah.
We know what's funny, Mason. As soon as you predicted Arizona State to win, all the Mormons left. So
Yeah.
I think we had, dude. I think we got some sneaky. We got some sneaky little Mormon fans in the comment section, hiding out, and that's okay. We're here for it. We're here for it.
Over there peeking through the blinds.
Yeah. They hate us now. They're not going to watch anymore. We predicted them to lose 2 weeks in a row. And, everybody's not everybody, but a lot of people are just looking for somebody on YouTube to blow some smoke up their ass. And once people figure out this ain't the channel for that, then they're typically, most of them are gone. We only got real ones around here, really, to be honest. All right. We saved the worst for last. Army at Notre Dame. 15.5 point spread here. Notre Dame is obviously the favorite. Over under set at 44.5. 7 p.m. Eastern time. This one's going down at Notre Dame. Touchdown Jesus in attendance here. Let's look at some of the stats and things like that, and we'll kind of bring it up. You can see the matchup predictor there by ESPN, 87.7%. I don't put like a ton of stock in that or anything, guys, but it is a reference point that we can kind of look at and at times point and laugh at. But they use a model like a lot of people would use, right? And here's kind of a model prediction that I thought was pretty interesting. This is from College Football Nerds, and it shows Army as winning this game. 17.5 to 11.5 whenever they simulated the game. And look, you got to take this with a grain of salt, okay? There's literally a disclaimer on the page whenever you do this model, and it says that teams that have not played as tough a schedule as other teams are going to be weighted incorrectly. And Army, as much as I love this story and everything that Daly has done there at quarterback, and he's had an amazing season. This model is not taking into account who these teams have played. And Notre Dame has NFL talent on their team, Mason, and that's what I'm worried about. It's kind of like what we talked about with Indiana, Ohio State. And for the record, I picked Indiana to cover the spread there. But whenever we start getting down to it, man, and I'm not saying Army's got an X's and O's advantage here because I don't think they do necessarily. I'm sure Army doesn't have a better coaching staff than what Notre Dame does necessarily. But the Jimmies and the Joes, I think, are probably going to make all the difference here. Notre Dame recruits really, really well, guys, and they've got really, really good football players all around. And whenever these two teams get off the bus, it's going to be very clear which one has got a physical advantage. And not only does Notre Dame look the part, they are extremely physical. They're the only defense in the country that's ranked top 10 in every metric. And so I think they're a team that doesn't get talked about a lot as being one of the best defenses in the country, but I think that they are in all reality. And they give themselves a ton of advantages by playing such solid defense and running the football very effectively. Notre Dame has been absolute hell to stop on the ground and hasn't always been the most efficient rush attack, but boy, it's been potent. And the passing game has come on a little bit as the years went on, but I don't think any of us ever thought that this Notre Dame team was just going to be one of the best passing offenses in the country with Riley Leonard at quarterback. But that boy, they can run the football, Mason. They do it at about 200 yards a game clip, which is really, really good. And beyond that, when you run the ball that successfully, you are limiting possessions of the other team. Now, What is the let's go back and look at the total for this game. It's set at 44.5, and you see what the model is predicting here. I do think that this is gonna be a low scoring game, Mason.
Hmm.
Now, um, this low scoring, I'm not sure. I could see Notre Dame winning this thing 21-17 or something. I mean, I could see that happening. I could also see Notre Dame winning this game 28-7. You know,
Hmm.
um, so I don't think that there's going to be a ton of offensive possessions here. I think this is going to be a game where um, both teams will probably be able to sustain some drives. Going to be really tough to put it in the red zone. These two teams going against one another. I think it's going to be real tough to get it into the end zone. I don't think there'll be a ton of points to go around. Probably a good bit of field goals. As far as in relativity to the scoring of the game, there's going to be majority field goals. I think we'll see. Turnovers is something that you can't predict. We'll have to see how both of these teams do protecting the football. I don't have any reason to believe that they won't be able to do that. Each one of them. Um, yeah, man. I like Army. I think I like Army to cover this. But again, man, I'm not rushing to go bet this thing. This thing opened up at 17. It's already been bet down to 14.5. You know what I'm saying? So, and the total opened at 43.5, and it's been bet up to 44.5. So y'all can kind of see what the public is thinking on this one. The public is thinking higher than 43.5. So I'd love to bet against the public there, and I probably will bet the under. Um, I'll let that number keep going up through the week. Join us Thursday for our betting show, and we'll have all our best bets. Um, but the public is betting with Army here, and that just honestly almost scares me off right there. I know everybody wants Army to win this game. If you're not a Notre Dame fan, you want Army to win. Um, but that doesn't make a difference whenever we're talking about outcomes in college football. I think Notre Dame wins. I think Army has a chance to keep it within the 14.5. But anything below 14, there's no way I'm betting on this game. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning with you on that. What I like the under in this game mostly. I think from a betting perspective, we can all root for Army. I'm in the Army, so of course I'm rooting for Army to win this game. Most of America is, but at the end of the day, Notre Dame is just a superior product on the field, and nobody's denying that. However, this isn't going to go like the Navy game went against Notre Dame. If you turn that game off in the first quarter, I don't blame you. But that game was very dependent. It got out of hand early because of the turnovers. If you recall that, that game had just. I mean, I think it was like 6 turnovers, if I'm not mistaken, Mark, in that football game. I mean, the Navy could not sustain drives, and I don't think you see that from Army. I think that they will be able to drive the football, keep this relatively close. I'm hesitant to bet Army to keep it within 17 points. I think that would be more of a fair line, 16 and a half, 17 and a half, somewhere around there. I might lean Notre Dame against the spread here, but I do like it to be a lower scoring game. Surprisingly, Army's defense is actually really good against the run. They're actually fifth in total defense. They're only giving up 273.9 yards per game, and then against the run, they're averaging giving up 82.6 yards per game. That's good for third in the country. They've been really really solid on that side, which is obviously what Notre Dame wants to do. They want to run the football. Now, has Army faced a rushing attack as good as Notre Dame's? Absolutely not. Not even close. I'm not going to pretend to tell you that that's a stat that Army's going to be able to exploit to the point of winning this football game. But I am going to tell you that they're good enough to stop some drives and get some and force some punts, and get the ball back and do the same thing on the other side of the football and try to run the football. They're first in the country in rushing yards per game at 334.9. So they're going to run the football somewhat effectively, which by the way, Notre Dame is 43rd in the country at defending the run. They're averaging giving up 126.2 yards per game. So the advantage there is for Army in a sense. However, like you mentioned with the college football nerds model, when you look at the stats relative to performance or relative to strength of schedule, I guess I should say, Army doesn't measure up. Which now that I say that, I had to think for a second. Outside of Texas A&M's defense, who has Notre Dame faced that you look at and say their schedule's so much harder than Army's? It's probably not actually. Yeah, Louisville's one, but just as for a schedule, as a whole, I mean, are they really that much different? Probably not.
Yeah,
probably not a ton.
one of the big games was supposed to be Florida State, right, for Notre Dame, and obviously we all know what this came down to. I mean, Florida State lost last week, and they didn't even play. So they lose every week, even when they don't play. They were on a bye week, so yeah, that kind of took a little sting out of the schedule,
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. But for my prediction, I'm probably going to bet the under here, even at 44.5. I think that this has a chance of being a game, like you said, that Notre Dame wins like 28-9. Right? I could see that sort of happening where they cover, they cover the spread, but also, the under hits. I think that if Army's able to cover the spread here, I think even more so, it's likely that the under hits, because I'm thinking for Army to cover the spread, this game's going to be like 21-14 or 21-13 or 17, somewhere around there, and it's kind of a gutsy performance because both of these teams are going to run the football. I think this is going to be like a 2.5 hour game. Like it's going to be super short. And in that sense, I think under is the right play here, especially if the betting public is going over 44.5.
Yeah. One of my betting stances this season has been betting with Notre Dame in these types of games right here. They've overperformed in a lot of these situations this year, and I like Notre Dame to. It's hard for me to bet against them after what I've seen this year. I bet against them in that Louisville game, and Notre Dame came out on top. I will say this, and somebody said something about this in the comment section a minute ago. Notre Dame has been the beneficiary of a lot of turnovers. Now, have they caused the turnover? It's the old chicken or the egg. Did the offense they're playing hand the ball over, or did Notre Dame go and get it? I mean, it's obviously a mix of the two. But Louisville shot themselves in the foot in the first quarter of their game against Notre Dame. Navy turned the ball over a bunch against Notre Dame. Even last week, Notre Dame got 5 turnovers against Virginia and only won 35-14. I mean, now that is a comfortable win. I'm not saying it's not. I mean, that's 3 touchdowns. That's a butt whooping in any circle that I come from. But if they don't have the 5 turnovers, what is that game? I can't help but wonder. Or if Virginia has 1 turnover or 2, but they had 5 and they lost by 3 touchdowns. So I think Army is the right side of this. I think Army plus the points is the right side. It conflicts everything that I've kind of programmed myself to believe this year. But that's college football betting. You better be ready to get out of your comfort zone. Scared money don't make no money. Join us on Between the Lines. It's Thursday, every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. It's our best bets against the spread. We'll probably have some bets on this one. We're both feeling the under. I think I'm feeling Army plus the points. I think maybe Mason is too. Let's see where this total goes throughout the week. Come and join us on First and Long College Football Show as we go live on Thursday. We'll do it again on Saturday night / Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, Tuesdays. We've got live shows throughout the week. Come hang out with us here on the First College Football Show. All right, guys. That's about all she wrote for today. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Yeah, that's a good saying. My dad's favorite saying, and the saying that he drove into my head whenever I was a kid. this doesn't really have anything to do with anything. I'm just commentating here, but the harder you work, the luckier you'll get. Is that true? Is it true? I don't know, but mantras I live by, right? I thought that Army quarterback was good. He was a passer. He was a passer. What do you mean? What do you mean?
He's saying he thought that Daly was a better passer because his next comment says, "Are you telling me they're going to run the option only like the whole game?"
He's more of a
I'll
runner.
be honest. Yeah, he's definitely more of a runner. He leads college football, or at least was leading college football in rushing yards for a long time, but especially as a quarterback. So I'm not going to pretend to be some huge Army fan or somebody who's watched a ton of Army. If this game is close, this will be the first Army game that I've watched for its entirety. So I can't pretend to sit here and tell you who he is or who he isn't. But my understanding is that Army has been a better passing football program here as of late. That they're not just a three clouds or 3 yards in a cloud of dust type of offense anymore. They've got Jeff Monken, which is Todd Monken's cousin, who's running who's the head coach there, and has his hands in the offense. He does not from my understanding, Jeff Monken does not necessarily want to run a triple option.
Right.
He doesn't. He kind of does it because he's at a service academy, but he wants to run a traditional offense. And so if he's got the pieces to do it, I think he'll do it from time to time. It sounds like they're running a little bit more of a balanced offense now. So I'm excited to watch them in prime time. I mean, how often do you get to see a service academy playing a night game like this in a big matchup? It should be. I think it'll be a fun one to tune into.
Yeah. Last comment here, and we'll get out of here. Double O'Neal getting left out of the championship last year as an undefeated team, I think broke Florida State's will to play. Yeah, well, and it's a bunch of mercenaries. I mean, I think this is the risk you run. Why? Look, okay. I'm gonna try to make this really quick because we got to get out of here. Florida State is one of the most storied names in all of college football history. And that name and that jersey and that stadium and just everything to do with Florida State has got a rich, rich history. So why a team with such a rich history would let a coach come in and run their program based off anything but that is just a mystery to me. This guy has said we'll pass on a lot of the high school kids to get a lot of transfer portal guys. And I'm not saying they haven't recruited high school. They've gotten some high school guys, but they went real heavy in the portal. Well, guess what? Whenever you get a bunch of mercenaries in there and something happens like that, they don't have skin in the game. These guys don't have skin in the game. They didn't choose Florida State out of high school. They weren't in high school saying, "Man, I can't wait to get to Florida State." No, they were at a different college, and then all of a sudden they transferred, and then things don't go their way, and they quit. We watched it happen to Ole Miss a couple of years ago. Same thing happened to Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss got to 7 or 8-0 and lost their last 4 games, or last 3 or 4 or whatever it was. So Florida State is kind of catching their own version of karma in the fact that they tried to take a shortcut, and there was no need for it because they've got a brand name that they could have built up if they'd done it the right way. But they were looking for a shortcut, and it bit them in the butt. It absolutely bit them in the butt. And it just so happened to be a year where, Georgia got left out too. Georgia lost a championship game and got left out of the playoffs. So, Florida State, and we saw what happened to Florida State when they played Georgia. They got absolutely murked. So it was the right decision to keep them out, I do believe. But, that's a discussion for a show last year. But Florida State, the reason I brought them up, they fired a bunch of their coaches this past week. That's how they lost the bye week, and fired a bunch of their coaches acting like it's their fault. Same coaches that led your team to an undefeated season, and now you're firing them. So, yeah, I mean, we can take a shit and then, throw some dirt on top of it and call it a mud pie if we want to. But, I mean, we've all seen what's happened there. It's not the coordinators. It's not it's the head coach. It's the head man and their approach to building a football team in modern day college football. And it's the wrong approach. It's the wrong approach. You've got to have a good mix of high school players in there, and then you go to the portal for needs, right? And not to mention Double O'Neill on comment section, people quit now over money. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. There's no doubt about it. There's a whole new nuance to this whole thing. So does Florida State have the money, to go buy another awesome roster? I don't know. I don't know if they do or don't. If they had the money to fire this coach, you'd think they do it now. I don't think they got the money. If they had the money, they'd been out of the ACC by now too, right? They would have bought their way out. They don't have the money for that. They had to go begging some guy at JP Morgan to bail them out, and JP Morgan said no. So Florida State's in a really tough situation, and I can't kind of help but sit there and laugh. All right, let's get out of here, guys. It's been an awesome week here on the First and Long College Football Show. We love you guys. I thank you so much for watching. Y'all hit that like button on the way out. Help us out. We're going to be on for the reaction show again this weekend as usual. We'll have all that good stuff coming up next week. Good luck this weekend, guys. I think we're going to see a couple of wild outcomes over the next couple of weekends. Buckle up. Let's have some fun. See y'all this weekend. Hit us up in the comment section if you think of something between now and then. Thank y'all so much.
Thanks.